All right, Trajanus here, and time for the first ever Fuller House game. Same kind of settings, different map, but similarly small and constrained, but with all nations. But we've moved on to the Middle Age. So yeah, this is going to be not my first Middle Age game multiplayer, but definitely I am less well versed at Middle Age. So it'll be interesting. It's less magic, right? So there's going to be fewer sites, generally less powerful mages individually, more population, more gold, less blood overall in the Middle Age. Late Age is kind of where blood rules. But yeah, people say that Middle Age is probably the age with the strongest nations. There's some really, really powerful nations in it. It's got Yis and Celeria and, plenty of other powerhouses. I think Nazca is in the Middle Age. I'll double check. But anyway, yeah. Some really powerful nations in Middle Age. Really powerful nations in all ages. But yeah, Middle Age is arguably the strongest age. So yeah, it'll be interesting. We are not playing one of the strongest nations. We're playing Marignon, which is a human nation and fire focused. So for those of you who've seen my early age Ermor playthrough, we're kind of essentially doubling down. And it has magic diversity problems, all the things that I love, but of course sacred cavalry. So yeah, Marignon is definitely not considered one of the strongest nations, but it's not a super weak nation. I do think it's going to struggle a bit in a large game like this. That's pretty much guaranteed to go late. I think most human nations are going to struggle a bit if a game goes really late. But I think they're a cool nation. I like their theme, and there's cool stuff they can do. So yeah, going to be trying to do this one, this cast of this game a little differently. I'm going to try to record it not live, but at least where I have not seen the turns yet. Previously, I was kind of recording well after the game had gotten past that point. So yeah, and then hopefully we'll see. Going to try to focus a little less on all the details for newer players, and try to keep things moving along a little more quickly. But yeah, I'm kind of long-winded, so no promises there. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. So let's talk about Marignon and what makes them tick. Really, probably let's talk magic, right? So they get fire and astral, that's kind of their main thing. And if you look at their sites, yeah, so they get 4 fire a turn and just 1 astral pearl. So it's kind of interesting, in comparison to early age Ermor, which I've been playing recently, and is definitely one of my favorite nations. They get a more split income. So Marignon is a little different, where their astral income isn't very good, but they actually get better astral access overall. So it's kind of an interesting mix where they have better astral mages, but they have fewer astral pearls to go around. And they definitely have things that they want to spend astral pearls on. And then, of course, they get a ton of fire gems, which is kind of considered, one of the most worthless gems. So, this is perhaps not great, but, we'll see what we can do with it. And then, they just have another site where they can get architects. So they do have a little bit of air and a little bit of earth, but very, very little, right? So their masters, who are their cap-only mages, can random, basically just 1 air and 1 earth. Yeah, theoretically it could be 2, but you can't count on that. And that's it, right? Everybody else is just fire or astral. So magic diversity is very much a problem with Marignon. They do get some better air with their summons, which they can bring in with astral. So later in the game they get better air access, but still not fantastic air access, and their earth access is pretty pitiful. So yeah, magic diversity always a consideration when you're playing Marignon. In terms of, they get a pretty powerful bless bonus. So assuming that you activate the fire and astral bless, which you definitely should if you're playing Marignon. If you don't go full rainbow, or if you don't put 4 points into fire or 4 points into astral, right, which is when you start getting bless points, you won't get these extra bless points. But if you do activate them, right, normally I think you get 4 bless points, right, if you put 4 points in fire. With Marignon, you'll get 6 plus points. And so same for Astral, which is really nice. Like, extra plus points is super cool. So that is a really nice benefit. And they start with a Citadel. So, you start to see better forts in the Middle Age, and Citadels can recruit 1.5 mages a turn, assuming you're doing like the 2 commander points, because Citadels get 3 commander points, each turn to spend. So you can, bring mages in faster. And they do get an architect, who can build them Citadels in other places. So yeah, they get, better forts than, a lot of other people. Citadels are still not, they're more common in the late age, not as common in the Middle Age. So yeah, this is definitely also like a nice advantage. They have good priests, which is arguably like pretty important in the Middle Age. Middle Age Ermor is a completely undead nation. Celeria, can pump out like a ton of undead. I think, Nazca can, do some undead stuff. There's lots of undead threats in the Middle Age. So having some powerful priests is nice. And they are inquisitors, a lot of them, so they can, preach away enemy dominion really quickly. Arguably, Marignon could be used for like dom kill strategies. That's not really what I'm planning on doing with them. I think dom kill is kind of tough. Maybe easier in a smaller game. They do get like stealthy preachers, which is really useful for dom kill. So it's something to think about. If you want to go that route, but yeah, not something we're going to focus on here. So yeah, let's talk about the units. So one of the big things about Marignon is they have Recruit Anywhere Sacreds, which is really nice. So the first of these is the Flagellant. They deal a lot of damage if they can land a hit. They're not very good. They're pretty much just chaff. They have absolutely no protection. They have abysmal defense skill. They just die to everything, right? They tend to die quickly when exposed to missile fire. No. They just die in droves when exposed to missile fire. And it doesn't get much better when they get into melee. But the flail is decent, right? It gets a bonus versus shield, and it gets 2 attacks, and it's quite damaging. And of course, these guys will carry your bless. So later in the game, when you can get some protection buffs on these guys, and they buff okay. They don't have any armor, so, but they also don't have any natural protection, so you're getting the full, benefit of whatever protection buffs you put on them. So anyway, when you buff these guys a bunch with like a good bless, these guys can actually be kind of scary. They're decent chaff. And the other thing too is they're extremely cheap, right? Upkeep is extremely low, and gold cost is normal, but like resource and recruitment point cost very low. They are of course limited. You have to have a temple, and you can only recruit as many as you have, dominion strength. So they can be a little tough to mass, but since you can recruit them anywhere, it's kind of something you can do in the background while you're doing other recruitment. So yeah, they're not great. There's some memes you can do with these guys, like have them explode and etc. I don't really recommend that. I also probably wouldn't tailor your bless around flagellants. But they're a consideration, definitely. If you can throw these guys a bone or two, they're not the worst troop. So, nice thing to have. Recruit Anywhere Sacred. You can never really ignore that. Marignon gets crossbowmen, which is definitely nice. They're more common in late age, and, they're a middle age thing. They don't appear in early age. Fewer people get a hold of them in middle age. And, armor is not quite as prevalent as in the late age. So I would say, this crossbowman is better than average, to get a hold of. And it's definitely something, as Marignon with flaming arrows, you can take good advantage of. So definitely planning on making, quite a bit of use of crossbowmen. Obviously, like, archers do have a lot of issues. They tend to fall off, later in the game. There's lots of like archer counters. These guys also will deal quite a bit of friendly fire. So there's definitely downsides, the crossbowmen, but a strong troop to have available, and definitely something you want to take advantage of, I think, as Marignon. And then yeah, so for the rest of their troops, I don't know. I don't really like their infantry. They're okay, I guess. The skills are not fantastic. They don't have shields, which is kind of an issue, if you're trying to take advantage of the crossbowmen, and they just sort of suffer from like ranged fire in general. Their protection is mediocre, like skills mediocre at best. They at least, recruitment points is not so much an issue, but they do take quite a bit of resources, like average gold cost. They're not the worst. Like, these guys are fine. This is like solid. Like, the two-handed weapon is nice. Like, it does deal a lot of damage. So, they get a bonus like to morale because they have such fancy clothes. So there's that, I guess. These guys are kind of all like equivalent. Kind of everything that I said for the swordsman like applies, to the halberdier as well. These guys get a castle defense bonus, which is nice. So they're better at like holding up walls, but their attack suffers. Like their attack skill is worse. They do get pierce, right? They get slash and pierce, so they can be better against like heavy armor. Otherwise like all the same things apply. And then, the pikes are probably the weakest. They do have a chance to repel because it's length 5, but with such an abysmal... It's not an abysmal. It's an average attack score. But with an average attack score, there's a good chance that they will not be, repelling. And, their damage is like the lowest of the bunch. It is pierce, right? So they get a bonus against armor. The defense skill is like really miserable. All of them have pretty high resource cost. I think these guys are probably the weakest, but they're not terrible. I'm not really sure which to recruit between the halberdier and the swordsman. It probably depends. If you're up against elves or something like that, you're going to want to go with better attack. Although, I don't know, attack 11 versus attack 9. Like, I guess the 11, but it's still not going to go great. But so I'm not really sure, like, between these two. It probably depends. It is really nice that these guys hold up, the walls better. And then the other infantry, the man-at-arms, he's better, but he's also pricier, right? So now, like, recruitment points can be an issue. Like, his resource cost is about the same, but he's significantly more gold expensive. But he gets a shield, which is really nice. His protection is better. His skills are a little bit better. His morale's a little better. He's also a bodyguard, like a pretty solid bodyguard, actually. Definitely something you could put, on your mages. Marignon actually has like decent bodyguard, kind of abilities. So anyway, if you have the money, like this is probably like my preferred infantry, but they can be kind of hard to mass. And they don't do as much damage, right? Because it's like just a one-handed sword and slashing. So if you're up against like really high protection and stuff, these guys are probably worse. But they do have a shield, which is really nice, and better protection and better skills. And then they also get this royal guard. It's just really solid cavalry. Protection 21 is really nice, like good skills. It is very expensive, just like across the board. They get like a full like heavy lance charge, which is really nice, and like all the normal cavalry stuff. These guys are an even better bodyguard. Probably would use these guys as bodyguards, on really important, mages and etc., really important commanders. Don't really plan on using these guys a bunch. I don't really get them all that much, and that is mainly because they get outclassed by your Sacred, which is also recruit anywhere, the Knight of the Chalice. These guys are more expensive, but their upkeep is probably less because they're Sacred, right? So this is 20 gold a year, and these guys, 32 gold a year. So if you have them sitting around, Knights of the Chalice are just better all around. And then of course, they're Sacred, so they carry the bless. And as Marignon, you have a lot of things that you need to use points on, but you should definitely be building a bless for these guys, I would say. Because, again, these are recruit anywhere. So you can actually, these guys scale. You can mass these up. You can use them, like, the whole game. And, like, they're pretty good, right? Like, they have solid skills, better than average strength, hit points humanish. High protection. Magic resistance is a little on the weak side, but better than average human at least. They're kind of slow. That's just like a thing about Marignon in general. They are not quick, like especially these guys, map move 10. That is one thing. At least their other infantry is map move 12, which is not a huge improvement. But sometimes these guys can move 2 provinces a turn over like plains and stuff like that. These guys pretty much always just 1 province a turn, so they really tend to slow your armies down. But there are other reasons that your armies tend to be slow anyway, so it's not always the end of the world. But anyway, so yeah, these guys are kind of slow for cavalry. Combat speed is decent, so that's at least nice. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of what you have going. Not the only thing you have going for you is Marignon, but this is like a huge source of your power, right? Like, if you're gonna go up against Marignon, like, you're probably gonna see some Knights of the Chalice with at least a decent bless, because their magic has some issues for sure. So anyway, definitely planning on, giving this guy a solid bless. Definitely think that, you should be giving him a solid bless. Like, it's a good sacred, made even better by the fact that you can recruit it, anywhere you have a fort and a temple. So yeah, troop lineup is okay, right? Like, I mean, cavalry wise, you have like pretty good options. The Flagellant is nice as chaff, like later. Crossbowman is solid, but like the infantry kind of lets you down a bit. You end up suffering like really high attrition with this infantry. So not the best troop lineup, but not bad either, definitely. And then of course, really strong like sacred option here, which is nice. So yeah, in terms of the commanders, they get a scout, that's nice. They get a regular assassin, which is cool. Marignon's expansion can be a little wonky at the start. So yeah, I think I usually do like a little bit of assassin expansion, which is a little wonky itself. So we'll see. But having a recruitable assassin chassis is nice. Like, he is just like the regular human assassin. So, he's not going to assassinate a lot of stuff. But if you give him a bottle of water, some of the Pokemon items, if you will, he can do okay. So yeah, you get the Troubadour, who's a spy, which is kind of cool. Spies are nice. You can see when you move through enemy territory, you see any sites that they've searched out, and you get to see like the exact level of PD investment, and just more information in general. I like scouting, so I think having access to spies is really cool. You can also infiltrate the enemy's capital, and then you get their mundane score graphs, so you can kind of get an idea of at least some of their strength. So that's pretty cool. I do think they get notified. Maybe not if you succeed the first time, but a lot of times you fail the infiltration, and they definitely get notified then. So, you got to be a little careful using it, I guess. But, like, people don't... It's not the end of the world, It's like, hey, I'm just trying to get some information. So, yeah. And then you can also use them to incite unrest, which probably isn't worth it on the balance. Like, maybe if you build up 3 or 4 and there's, like, a really valuable province, like, realistically, you would probably do it on an enemy capital. If there's a really capital-dependent nation, and you could lock it down with unrest and prevent their recruitment, that's probably the only time that it's worth it. Just causing unrest in like some random province is like probably just not worth the turns. Maybe if it's a really valuable province, you can get the unrest up pretty high and mess up their income. Maybe. But, it's a thing that you can do. Definitely, like I said, for a more capital-focused nation, that can be an option. They also technically have seduction, so they can also kind of operate as assassins, and in theory they can get you some female mages from your enemies. Since they're not a mage themselves, and they just have a broadsword and no protection, and their combat skills are pretty meh, they don't make very good assassins, basically. So, oftentimes when you try to seduce, that's going to be the death of your troubadour. But, magic diversity is a problem for you. And, if you can pick up a couple enemy mages, I don't know. It's something that you have available at least. They are a little pricey to just be throwing them away, in seduction attempts, but... it's something that you have, and like I said, the spy is useful, so not a bad unit to have. The friar, who's pretty cool, probably he can lead expansion parties. He's pretty squishy, so you do have to be careful about arrow fire, but yeah, I mean, he's a stealthy priest, which is kind of nice. You can just preach in enemy territory, like get your dominion in there. Dom kill is on the table. It's much easier to do dom kill, if you have a stealthy priest. And you can just pop these like out of their foreign recruit, so you can if you have an unforted temple, which you probably don't want to have, but I sometimes like I will get with Marignon like one province that has an unforted temple that's like fairly protected that I can just pop these guys out of, because they can be scouts as well essentially, and I think they're probably, let's see, upkeep 18. And yeah, they're technically a little cheaper to maintain than a scout, although they're quite a bit more expensive to recruit, so like it's going to take a really long time for that to actually like matter. But I mean, since they can like hang out and preach, like they're not that much more expensive than scouts, so I actually think it's totally viable to like scout around with friars, and then you have a bunch of like priests available to you, which is not, again, Urmor is out there and like etc. So there's a lot of undead. It's not the worst thing to have some priests in your back pocket, and yeah, these guys can operate as scouts when you don't need them, as priests. So yeah, I think the friar is pretty cool, and I think I usually have like one province that's not a fort that you can pop them out of, so they don't have to compete with your mages. And then yeah, you get the Paladin, which is kind of interesting. He's really kind of like your only non-mage commander, like your only non-squishy commander. So yeah, I usually use this guy to lead like sacred expansion parties, which is a little rough because his resource he's very resource intensive, and he's not cheap via gold either, which is kind of sad. Like he's got combat caster, which I think you're kind of like paying a premium for and getting screwed on. So yeah, this is something I would like to see, like give him like, I don't know, one path of fire or like something, because it's like combat caster. I mean, he's a priest, right? So he can cast holy spells, but it's kind of like, I mean, he's gonna cast like bless, and that's pretty much it. So anyway, he is a combat caster, yay. You can thug with this guy, but it's probably not a good idea. He's fairly expensive and he's not really a mage. So, and like you can just use like parties of like your knights, and yeah. So anyway, you can thug with these guys, but he's not the best thug chassis. But he's not bad, and he very difficult like to kill. And he's a good commander, so you get all formations available to you. But he is a bit expensive. And then yeah, your mages. So the initiate, I actually do use this guy as a researcher. I don't know, we'll see. He's very cheap to maintain, even though he's not sacred, but he's pretty awful. Like Fire 1 is just not like a great path. Like you can summon in lesser fire elementals. And that's probably the most useful thing he can do. There's a few other spells he can cast. You give him a gem, he can bring himself up to Fire 2 with that gem. Like if it's real late in the game, you can do like Pillar of Fire. It's not like they can do nothing, but yeah, they're not great, but they're okay as researchers. And like Marignon, like a lot of their stuff is kind of on the expensive side. So it is nice having a cheaper research option, even if it's not the strongest mage. And he's also probably like your youngest commander, which is nice because yeah, Marignon has age problems. Like yeah, even the paladins, they're kind of close to old age. So another reason that I mean, this takes a while, but in a larger game like this, you might see a couple old age paladins. So anyway, yeah, the Initiate, Fire 1, the Inquisitor, yeah, I sometimes get these a few early on. I think, Priest 2 is not the best, but can be nice for banishment strength. He is an Inquisitor, so he'll preach down enemy dominion really, really quickly. He's kind of nice early on because he can handle building a lab and a temple, where you need it. And, since he is a mage, he can do some researching, when you're not using him for other stuff. But he is decently expensive, and in terms of actually being a mage, he's, again, just a Fire 1, which, as we discussed, not super useful. He's also old, so, yeah, that's everybody's old here in Marignon. So I don't get a ton of Inquisitors, but not the worst thing to have. And then you get the Witch Hunter, and like this is you pretty much your battle mage. You're going to be getting a lot of Witch Hunters as Marignon. They're all like Astral 1. No randoms here, which is kind of nice. What you see is what you get. Fire 2, like yeah, see this guy can do fire magic. You can communion them up. They are like priests. So, they can communion up and be like Holy 3, so you can get your divine blessings and etc. You can even get them up to, Holy 4 for fanaticism and etc. They're not the worst researchers, but, they're kind of expensive, for what you get in terms of researching. Like, they are sacred at least, so like the upkeep isn't as nasty as you might expect based off the recruit cost. They're not slow to recruit, which is cool. They get a patrol bonus, which, yeah, I mean, you should not be patrolling with your mages generally. It is nice that you can communion them up, and they can do big astral, and they can do big fire, and yeah, that's what they can do. This is your guy. You're going to be getting him a lot. He's not old, but that's a lie. Because he's almost old, and then when the fire kicks in, like a lot of these guys are going to end up as old age, because I think there's like a little bit of wiggle in terms of the exact age you come in. So I think it's like roughly like 50-50 in terms of which these guys are old and which aren't. And then the guys that aren't old will often get old age fairly quickly. So yeah, old age is a problem even for these guys, which is sad. And then you get the architect, I mentioned. You're pretty much just going to want like one or two. He's cap only, so all the rest of these guys are recruit anywhere up to this point, and now we're hitting the cap only stuff. So the architect, since he competes, for other cap only recruitment, you're probably not going to want a ton. And like he does actually take a lot of resources to pop out, so he'll cut down on any sacred cavalry recruitment that you're doing. Unless you have a ton of resources. He does have like a siege bonus and a castle defense bonus, so there is maybe an argument to be made of like picking up a decent number of these guys to provide siege strength or siege defense. And I mean, it is nice like for the amount of like castle defense and especially like siege bonus that they provide versus like how much they eat is huge, right? Like this is kind of unheard of. But the fact that you need cap recruitment turns to bring them in, like, I don't know, I'm not really sold on that. But it is like, and it can be kind of deceptive too, because I'm sure you can surprise people, right, where they see like a relatively small stack of maybe like your sacred cavalry that's like a powerful army in the field, but you look at that and it's like, okay, that doesn't really have enough siege strength to like break my fort. I have a few turns to react, but it's got, like 6 architects in it, right? And then just boom, cracks the fort, and they're like, how did that happen? And it's like, I have a stack of architects. So maybe, but, I don't know. We'll see. You do want a few, to upgrade to get to citadels, but yeah, I don't know. I'm not totally sold because they're competing with the High Inquisitor, who's like a recruitable Holy 3. Also, again, Fire 1, Inquisitor, he's old, like kind of all the normal things. Decently expensive. Having recruitable Holy 3s is really nice for throne claims, and it's also an easy divine blessing. So I usually like to, pop out like about one of these guys per army. You can do a divine blessing with your witch hunters, so it's not as essential with Marignon, but you are going to want your witch hunters to be casting other spells, so it is kind of nice to be able to offload that, onto this guy. He is slow to recruit, so yeah, you're not going to want a ton of these guys, because they're going to compete with your Grand Masters, who are expensive. They are at least sacred, so, their upkeep is not cheap, but not as nasty as it could be. But yeah, these guys are expensive to bring in, slow to recruit. They are super old, so they're gonna get diseased and die and etc. But they are powerful mages, powerful fire, powerful astral, decent priests. And they get essentially 1 random, maybe 2 if you get real lucky. And I mean, you're gonna need these guys for the air and the earth. And since basically all of your like real mages, if you will, are communionable, you pretty much have all the air and all the earth battle magic available to you. Fatigue can be a bit of a problem, because obviously that's off path casting. So yeah, it can be an issue, but these guys are your only source of magic that's not fire or astral. past summons or your pretender. So you're pretty much going to want as many of these guys as possible. And they are solid mages, absolutely. Like, very powerful fire mages. And they can be pretty powerful astral too, like getting astral 3s. Like, you're definitely going to get astral 3s. And you're going to get fire 4s as well. So powerful mages, but, really squishy human chassis, and, they're going to get old and die. So they have their downsides. And I think that more or less covers it. Yeah, we talked about the income. I guess one final thing is that your capital site, it kills demons and undead, so you do have to be a little bit careful. If you try to do some summoning, I've definitely had this catch me. In single player, where it's like I have a rainbow pretender who's bringing in like a specter or something like that on the capital, and then he gets blasted by this site, and it does provide you a little bit of defense. I mean, obviously, if your capital is getting sieged, that's not good. But nobody, like, against Ermor or somebody, like, this is 10 armor negating damage, and they do get a magic resistance check, but like usually Chaffee Undead, they don't have very good magic resistance, default base, which is all they'll have, like, on the strategic map, generally speaking. And it's only a chance, but, it would be pretty good defense against, like, a really chaffy undead army. Doesn't come up a lot, and it's not really something you want to count on, but it's there, and you need to keep it in mind if you're summoning in any of your own undead. That's kind of Marignon. And as a final note, probably should talk about some of Marignon's specific spells, nation-specific spells and items. Some of these matter more than others. Probably the most important is Contact Harbinger. So this gives you this unit, and this is kind of your way into some real air magic. Now, your masters can communion up and do air magic for you, but this is, actually a caster on her own that can, or his own, actually, sure. But anyway, they can definitely do air magic for you, cast a lot of the big air spells, and they're on a chassis that isn't gonna immediately die, which is really nice for the end game. You can thug them, but it's probably not worth it. They're not crazy expensive, right? 25 astral pearls to summon them. But again, your astral income is a little underwhelming as Marignon. You're only getting 1 out of your capital, so you're kind of just, you're going to be doing plenty of site searching for astral, but it is luck of the draw. And there are other things that, you want to use astral for, so these are probably a little too valuable, to be running around thugging them. They're also not like fantastic thugs, right? They have no protection. They do have invulnerability and like pretty strong awe, with some resistances built in, and their stats are okay, and their hit points are like okay. You definitely can thug them, but yeah, they're not fantastic thugs, and they are extremely useful, and valuable, to you as casters. So probably not worth it, which is a little sad because, Marignon doesn't really have many, if any, thug chassis, right? It's pretty much just the Paladin, maybe, kind of. So anyway, but this is a really nice spell, and it comes fairly early at Conjuration 6. It's not crazy early, but yeah, you do need 4 astral. So, with a little bit of boosting, theoretically you could get a Grandmaster that's an astral 4, but that's very unlikely, but you'll get a decent amount of astral 3 Grandmasters, who are not difficult to boost up and cast this. So you don't actually need to worry about, putting anything on your pretender to get a hold of these harbingers. Now, getting a hold of, this angelic host is a little more difficult, though still doable. So this gives you need 50 astral pearls for this, so it's pretty pricey. It's Conjuration 7, which is still totally reachable, but, a little later. You get an archangel who has, a lot of fire, which is, it's not bad, I guess. You already get a bunch of fire, so it doesn't really help you. He is a holy 3, he can fly around, like, really crazy map move. For throne claims and rushes and stuff like that, definitely very useful. A very powerful caster. This is somebody that you certainly could thug or maybe even turn into some kind of a super combatant. He's got very high awe, pretty good invulnerability. Again, no protection, so you're going to need to fix that with gear. Hit points are decent, like skills are pretty good. It's just, at 50 astral pearls, especially because you're going to be wanting to get harbingers. Yeah, I don't get too many of these archangels. I guess maybe if the game goes really late. Now, he does come with these angels of the host, 6 of them, right? And they're units, and they're not bad. They kind of have all the same things like all these angels, right? They got the invulnerability, the awe, some resistances, no protection, good skills, okay hit points, right? Like these are dangerous units, absolutely, and they fly, right? So they're pretty good raiders, and I think you can use this as a remote attack spell, right? A distant province. So you can hit people deep with this, and obviously this is gonna crush most PD. But especially because the Archangel is going to be unkitted, it is a little risky if they run into a mage. All it takes is some magic weapons for them to be in big trouble because they have no protection, right, before you actually gear them out. So it's definitely a little scary, using this as a remote attack spell. Even though it's got 6 angels of the host and this Archangel, they can definitely be killed. Even kitted out, of course, anything can be killed, but unkitted, there's a lot of things that can kill them. So dropping 50 astral pearls is a little scary, using it as a remote attack spell. But, it's available. You get Heavenly Wrath, which I don't really recommend. It's a Conjuration 7. You get this Angel of Fury. I think, let's see. Yeah, you can also use this, I think, as a remote attack spell. But this is not even a caster, right? It is a commander, so you can kit it out. It has Blood Vengeance, which is kind of nice, and has Fear built in. Otherwise kind of normal angel stuff, right? No protection, invulnerability, ditches the awe for the Fear and Blood Vengeance. This is the Angry Angel. Pretty good skills, right? Yeah. But what is this? Yeah, 35 astral pearls. And it's not a mage. I don't know. I would just rather either get another Harbinger or, maybe save up for the Angelic Host. It is Conjuration 7 though, so, you will probably get to it because the other stuff. And then at Conjuration 9, you get Heavenly Choir, which, Conjuration 9 is super late game, and this is 144 astral pearls, so it's extremely expensive. But you do get what is this, 3 harbingers, so that's cool. They're good. It'd be cheaper to just summon in 3 harbingers, of course. You get 9 of these angels of the Heavenly Choir, who I think are pretty much the same as these guys, even though they have a different name. Actually, they're a little worse. That's kind of weird. So anyway, but kind of all the normal angel stuff, and you get 9 of them, so, and they're good enough, even though their skills are a little worse. Their magic resistance is worse. Weird. Anyway, so you get these guys instead of the host. And you get 9 of them. It's not bad. I think you can also use this as a remote attack spell, right? Maybe not, actually. I'll have to double check that. But, again, and then you get a Seraph, right? That's the big thing. And Seraphs are, really, really good, right? This is, 4 air, which is huge. You do not, even with the Harbingers, right? They're only air 3. And air 4 is kind of one of those breakpoints, right? Because with air 4, you can pretty much climb up and do more or less any spell in air. Not the case with air 3. So that is kind of game changing for you. Astral 4 is also really nice. That's not something you're going to get a hold of a ton as Marignon, although with boosters, it's kind of not the end of the world. He is a priest level 4 just built in, which is kind of nice. And fire 4, you got plenty of fire, but he's fire 4 too, or he or she, I don't, not not clear to me. And this is definitely something that you can turn into a super combatant. Kind of has the angel stuff, no protection, but very high invulnerability, very high awe, really good, pretty much all around resistances, just missing cold, good skills. You could turn this into a really scary unit, but you are paying a ton for it, and it comes really, really late. So very powerful unit, but probably not something that you're going to see very much, and like certainly not something you should count on, to get you through like the majority of the game. It's, just sort of like, yeah, if things get crazy and it goes late, you have this in your back pocket to bring out. Definitely like a cool thematic unit. And then you also get an evocation, Holy Pyre. It's fine, like solid range, like decent damage, 7+. And then the big thing is it's good against undead and demons, right? So, if you're going, you'll probably, you're a strong evocation nation anyway, right? Because you're doing a ton of fire magic, so you'll probably want to get some evocation at some point, and you'll just pick this up along the way, and you have it available to you. And if you're up against like demons or undead, there's nothing wrong with it. And then you get 2 national weapons as Marignon. So you get the Rooster Scepter, which is, kind of a hilarious weapon. I don't know how good it is. It is kind of expensive, right? So it's 10 gems to forge it. Again, kind of keeping in, Marignon's theme, right? It's pretty good against, it's really good against undead and demons, right? Like ×3. Like the boost that you get from it is fine. It's kind of low length, which is not fantastic. It also like causes this blindness, and it's a magic resist negates. You can blind people. I don't think this is any different than normal blindness. I'll have to double check that. Kind of more of a hilarious weapon. I guess if you're up against like a lot of undead stuff, especially maybe undead thugs, right? Blindness is pretty nasty against thugs. And you're very likely to deal damage, right, against an undead because you get this ×3. So like maybe, construction level 4, so at least you don't have to go up to 6. You're probably going to want to go up to 6 anyway as Marignon, for the lightless lanterns for your research. But yeah, you have it. It's interesting. And then the other one that you have, also kind of pricey, right, like 10 gems to forge, is the Mercy Brand. I actually do kind of like this weapon, but I may be wrong. We'll see. We'll have to see during the game, because I probably will forge a few of these. It comes pretty early, which is nice. The main thing in my mind is that it gives fear. And so I like to mix these in with like paladins that are, leading around, my sacreds that are going to be mixing in with armies, and like just sort of advance the paladins like with the troops, less with an eye to having them, go in and attack and do a bunch of damage, and more just, to provide like some fear bonus, like behind the main army. Otherwise, like, it's fine. I guess it does like some damage. You get a little bit of bonus. It's for 10 gems, it's kind of underwhelming, like as an actual like combat weapon. You get a patrol bonus, which is pretty meh. It makes you an Inquisitor, which is also, you get so many Inquisitors as Marignon, this doesn't really matter that much. It does have like this Flames of Mercy, so when you damage, and that is important, right? You do have to deal damage, which is not great. So, it's not like a brand effect where it's just going to happen no matter what. But you do fatigue damage, so that can be kind of nice. It's an extra like threat vector, where maybe you're struggling to. See, the problem is you have to deal damage. So it's like if you're struggling to deal damage or connect, this isn't really going to help you. But it's not bad to do fatigue damage. But I think mainly this is going to be useful like for the fear aura that it provides in larger battles, and even then it might not be worth the cost. So we'll see. Like I said, it does come early, which is kind of nice. But I wouldn't really use it as a combat weapon. And that covers their unique items. And this is what we'll be doing with Marignon. So this is probably the first time where I've kind of had an explicit game plan. I wouldn't say that it's a great plan, but there is a game plan. So I've taken a Master Alchemist, and I've taken him Imprisoned, which is probably my greediest build yet for a full house game. So I do think rushes could be a problem. We do have a fairly heavy bless on our cavalry, and our cavalry is good, so I think it will be able to hold off most things, but definitely against like early super combatants may struggle a bit. So the plan basically, like the main thing about the Alchemist is, he's kind of a normal rainbow chassis, right, in all ways, which is good for Marignon. I think, you can play nations all kinds of different ways, but a rainbow is a strong contender on Marignon because they have such, magic diversity issues. So we're pretty much a full, like, legit rainbow. We have 3 in every path, couple paths, we have a little more, but, mostly like standard rainbow. But like the main advantage of the Master Alchemist is he gets an alchemy bonus, a pretty hefty alchemy bonus. And so this, when you're turning gems into gold, you get even more gold than you normally would. So essentially the plan is we're going to go down enchantment, and we may just roll all. Enchantment 4 is a good target for Marignon in general because that gets you flaming arrows for your crossbowmen. And then at enchantment 6 is the gem generating global for fire. I think it's like 20 fire gems a turn that you get from it. And we have a bunch of fire income anyway. Obviously, we're all about fire here at Marignon. So we're going to be able to search for fire. We're going to have a ton of fire income. So what are we going to do with all this fire income? Yeah, some for flaming arrows, a few items here and there. Fire elementals, of course. Like, there's definitely things you can do with fire gems, right? But again, it's kind of what people consider one of the weaker gems, one of the less useful gems. So we have Recruit Anywhere Sacred Cavalry, who are quite expensive. So the plan is take all those fire gems, convert them into a ton of gold, and then pump out a ton of our really heavily blessed Sacred Cavalry. Yeah, we'll see. Is it going to be the best plan? Probably not. Is it an original plan? Probably not. As Marignon, you kind of lean on those Recruit Anywhere, like Sacred Cavalry. So you're just going to try to double down on that. We'll see how it goes. Of course, he does, he's going to do some site searching. Coming in really late from Imprisoned does mean that kind of cuts into the site searching that he can do for us. We're probably going to get him around turn 34, 36, something like that, which is pretty deep into the game. We're going to have to try to fix some of our diversity through independence, which is a little tougher in the Middle Age. That is one thing. As the ages move along, you tend to see fewer independent mages. Certainly much fewer nature mages, especially because there's less tribe and etc. So hoping to get some nature income from independence, but yeah, the fact that we're imprisoned does kind of cut down on how useful this magic diversity fix is. But once he comes in, we'll be able to do some site searching with him. He'll be able to summon in various things for us to kind of help with our path access. He's not really optimized. This is definitely more focused around the bless than any particular spells. So there's probably room for improvement in terms of where exactly I'm spending points. But yeah, I'm still relatively new, still learning. So it at least gets us solid access in all paths. In terms of the scales, fairly strong Dominion, right? I mean, if we're going to be focusing on recruiting our Sacred Cavalry, we're limited by our Dominion strength and how many we can recruit in each fort each turn. So we'll want to build some temples to try to raise this even more. There's certainly an argument to be made, to go higher than this. Probably this is enough because they're so resource and recruitment intensive that it's going to be difficult to get 7 out of a fort anyway. So it's probably going to be a long time and maybe never that this is going to be the limiting factor in terms of recruiting our cavalry. It will limit our Flagellant recruitment, but that's not the end of the world. So anyway, Dominion strength 7. In terms of the actual scales itself, we're getting a little bit of order. Would have liked to get a little more because again, we do need quite a few recruitment points for our cavalry. But other than our cavalry, you don't really need recruitment as Marignon. Most of your units are pretty low, like your infantry and the crossbowmen and etc. Like they don't need recruitment. So this is pretty much just for the cavalry. And, the resources tend to be much more of a limiting factor. Your infantry do require a lot of resources. The cavalry also require a lot of resources. So I think productivity 3 is an important pick. Heat 3, like we're not really going to get any movement advantages because we're pretty slow, but, we're going to want to do a lot of fire magic. And it's a way to get design points. So I think for Marignon, like going down to Heat 3 is a strong consideration. Marignon does want scales, right? Because you have Recruit Anywhere Sacreds, so you want to pump them out from as many places as possible. So maybe you could argue in terms of going all the way down to Heat 3, but I wanted a strong bless, so I've gone tanked Heat completely. Full growth, this is a big map, a big game. We're hoping to survive, into the late game, and growth is just a really useful, like really important income scale for larger, longer games. Misfortune 2, I just love barbarian attacks. It's always a little frustrating, but it's some of those free design points people talk about. We don't have any fortune tellers or anything like that, so we're gonna bear like the full brunt of this misfortune. It's probably worth it. There's so many other things that Marignon wants. It's really tough to justify luck, I think, on Marignon. Their heroes I'm actually not super familiar with, but are kind of underwhelming. I don't recall like any real like magic diversity that they get out of them or anything like that. So in vanilla, heroes aren't really too much of a concern with Marignon. No magic scales, which is like always a little sad. Like I do think this is an area that I'm probably still undervaluing. But like Marignon's research is not bad by any stretch. But of course, as a nation that can pump out like a lot of like cheap little mages that are each individually going to benefit from magic scales, Marignon will benefit more than a lot of nations from magic scales. So I do think it's a consideration. Obviously, like better research is always better. I've just cut it, for the bless and for the paths. Anyway, that's the scales. I don't hate them yet. We'll see how I feel at the end of this game. So in terms of the bless itself, so we've got this is the extra fire points at play and the extra astral points at play, right? Normally we would only get 4 fire points and 3 astral points, but as Marignon we get extra fire bless points and extra astral bless points, assuming we've unlocked them. So we've gone with both attack skill and like major fire resistance. I think this is solid. Like I would like more fire resistance. Like I think fire resistance is pretty much a must, because you're going to be doing a ton of fire magic. You're going to be summoning fire elementals. You're going to be, shooting like flaming crossbow bolts. Even from your own stuff, like your knights are going to need fire resistance. And there's plenty of other fire nations out there. Like fire is very damaging. So, major fire resistance I think is solid. Would like to get more. But attack skill is really nice. Like the knight's attack isn't fantastic. And a lot of the rest of this kind of doesn't really matter if they can't land a hit, So, I would like to get more fire resistance, but, it is nice to boost up the attack skill a little bit. Even with this boost, their attack skill isn't going to be fantastic. So, I don't know. Maybe this is too diluted, but we'll see how it goes. It definitely like helps. Swiftness. No shock resistance. Speed will be their armor. We all know that works out. For those of you who know your naval history. I don't know. Shock resistance is really important, right? Like shock is one of the, really damaging like elemental types. Like the spells deal the most damage. Absolutely. Armor doesn't help at all against, shock damage. So, pretty much the only way to reduce it is through, shock resistance. Our cavalry only have like 14 or 15 hit points. Like if they get hit with a thunder strike, even with 15 shock resistance, like they're going to die, pretty much in one hit almost every time. So, I've kind of been playing with not doing shock resistance. because I'm just not totally sold that it's really going to help out for like human HP, units. Now I will say, like, I really wish that I'd been able to fit, and really probably should have fit at least minor shock resistance in, because one of the other major problems is, things like Thunderbolt has like an AoE stun, and then the shock resistance will help a lot against that. So maybe minor shock resistance would have been better here. But I wasn't able to make it work in terms of like everything else that I wanted. So shock is going to be a big weakness for us. Now, I mean, swiftness is really nice, right? Because I mean, our cavalry is already decently fast, and they're going to get faster with this, right? So I mean, I really do mean speed will be their armor. If we're going to be up against a bunch of Thunderstrike, right, we're just going to have them in a line out front, and we're just going to send them right in like lickety split, and then hopefully they close the distance quickly enough, and we have enough of them that we can punch through. So we'll see. It's not that swiftness is bad. They also get an additional defense off of this, which is really nice, because defense is one of Sacred Cavalry's strengths, and they have good defense to begin with. So I think swiftness is a good pick here, but the lack of shock resistance could be a major Achilles heel. So we'll see how that goes. Going with defense skill again. So like we're going to get +3 defense on top of an already good defense skill. So that's really going to help. Like that's strong. And, manage to sneak in minor cold resistance, which is really nice. Cold is kind of one of the less relevant elemental damage types, and minor protection is not going to help us against like the really nasty cold damaging spells, but it will pretty much keep us 100% safe against cold fatigue plays. And so we're protected against like fire fatigue plays as well. And when you combine that with the fact that we have full heat dominion, like defensively I'm not too worried about cold damage. So I think we're again, we have an Achilles heel here, but like otherwise like pretty well protected against the other elements. And our skills are getting boosted, which is very important. And speaking of boosting skills, we've gotten strength of the earth, and in fact we've gotten strength of the flesh too, right? So double strength. So +4 strength, which is really nice. Humans can struggle to cut through like really high protection, because they don't have amazing strength. So getting +4 strength on our sacreds is going to make them a lot killier, and it's going to help. We have the lance charge, which is really nice, but it's used once, and there's lots of ways to kind of cheese lance charges, lance catchers, and etc. So relying completely on the lance charge for your damage output is risky. So yeah, I think double strength here is going to make them a lot tougher, and is really nice. Spirit Sight, always useful, so we don't have to worry about invisible units or in the dark. And this is actually extra nice on Marignon because with Fire and Astral you can cast Solar Eclipse. I think it's Alteration 5. And so it's not full darkness penalties. I think it's like -3 to relevant skills. But, since our sacreds have Spirit Sight, if we're fighting enemies, not like Urmor, right? It's a bunch of undead, they don't care about the dark. But, there's lots of living enemies out there, and they're not going to like fighting in the dark. This will be really good against elves, that aren't ready for it. And, then with our, attack skill boost, since they're going to be getting a penalty in the darkness, this is really going to help a lot and make sure that we connect. And then when we connect, like we're going to kill. So yeah, I think Spirit Sight, always a strong consideration, but especially if you're a nation that has access, to spells that can make things dark. So yeah, and then magic weapons, of course. Yeah, I mean, we don't have magic weapons, and there's like, yeah, it just gets around so many things. I think it's a really strong consideration. One thing to note is that we have a sacred mage core, right? And most of this is not, I mean, the resistances are going to help our mages, but like swiftness, attack skill, defense skill, strength, none of that is going to help our mages whatsoever. That is something to consider. This bless is very much focused around the knights and does relatively little for how much we're spending for our mages. So like that is something to consider, right? Marignon is somebody that kind of also wants a mage bless. It's just they want so many gosh darn things. You kind of have to pick and choose. I don't know, maybe somebody out there has figured out the perfect mix that gets everything perfectly. But the other thing too is that like, you know, a lot of this stuff is decent on our flagellants, right? Like the flagellants kind of want the same thing as the knights. I'd say like swiftness is definitely something that's going to help the flagellants like more than normal, because they really want to close the distance and not get hit with missile fire. But like otherwise they kind of want the same things. Like the attack skill will help them, the defense skill not so much, because their defense skill is so miserable, like, you know, whatever. The strength will help them. So like, yeah, like the flagellant, this bless, while not focused on the flagellants, will also help the flagellants, but it's kind of lacking for the mages, so something to consider. Anyway, yeah, magic weapons, very good. Had a couple extra death points left over, so threw on some Undying, and, you know, it helps. A little bit of HP. They'll die after the battle, but, you know, if they can get some more kills, that can make the difference. Full poison resistance, always nice when you can pull that off. You know, yeah, Foul Vapors is out there. Like, we're a human nation. Like, you know, we're a Foul Vapors target, absolutely. So yeah, this is just going to help a lot. And then, yeah, I've talked about the strength. So yeah, I mean, overall, like, I think a fairly strong bless. I would say the only other thing to mention is Marignon is a strong contender for taking an unaging bless, because they have such big old age problems. With an unaging bless, pretty much all of your witch hunters, who are your main combat mages, will come in. They won't be old, and I think even some of your grandmasters will come in and not be old, which is really, really nice, especially in a longer game like this. You know, it's like with those grandmasters, they're not all going to random air and earth, right? We have very, very little air and earth access. So it's like, oh, you get an air guy, like, that's cool, but then he gets a disease, right? And then dies off, which is just extra rough. There's movement penalties and fatigue penalties associated with old age. It's pretty rough. So I definitely played around with another build where I had unaging on it, and I think it's not crazy to take unaging on Marignon. On the other hand, you know, if you look at the penalties in terms of fatigue for old age, they're kind of dwarfed by the spell casting. So, you know, and it's like, yeah, losing the randoms hurts, but it's like, as long as they get out and do a little site searching anyway, and, you know, as long as we're able to always just have at least a couple available, right, you know, in our armies, it won't be the end of the world. Maybe look into like getting a hold of, you know, some healers. I mean, that's tough to do, but I know that there's a spell where you can cure disease with some nature magic, and we will eventually have some nature magic. So, I mean, there are things you can do, and unaging doesn't really, it is a luxury pick. You know what I mean? It doesn't make your mages really any better other than like not having the aging penalties. The movement penalties are probably the more annoying thing, but we move so slow anyway, oftentimes as Marignon. It's not going to matter as much. So yeah. So I didn't go with unaging. I do kind of hate it. It's going to make me sad. Absolutely. But yeah, for those of you who've seen my Macone playthrough, that's a place where I did take unaging and really probably shouldn't have. So, you know, I'm going to try to make the mistake in the other direction this time, you know, and see how that goes, right? Like maybe it's not that big a deal. So yeah, that's the build. You know, like I said, the plan is, you know, get a bunch of fire gems, turn them into money, turn that money into knights, and then, you know, conquer the world with knights. So yeah, we'll see how that goes.